Hi, Bighara here again with another installment of my video blog continuing my series on the Undead. Today I was going to start off by talking about ghosts. Well, ghosts and wraiths and specters and incorporeal undead, the walk through walls kind. And there's a lot of different varieties of this, but I'm kind of lumping them all together because apart from a few particulars, typically they're more or less the same idea. One little parenthetical assigned to that is the shadow, which in some versions of the game are not technically undead. They're creatures of the negative material plane, or the negative energy plane, and as such are not technically undead and can't be turned by clerics, which is sort of cool. But that's sort of off to the side there, and I'm not going to worry about that right now. The way I usually run with ghosts and stuff is there's two kinds of ghosts. There's your ghosts that are your what I refer to as your hauntings, which are, creaking floorboards, rattling chains, moaning sounds in the attic, stuff like that. And those are usually not monsters per se. I like to include that more as flavor. It's the kind of thing that can freak a character out, especially if you're running a horror type game. But it's not something where they're going to go and really fight something. It's almost like an echo of a lost soul or something like that. And then you have your actual, monster ghost or wraith or what have you. And these are more like evil spirits or insane spirits that haunt, but also are seeking revenge, are protecting their burial place, or something like that. I usually like to have a reason for a ghost to be there. The idea that a ghost is just wandering around and boom, oh, hey, look, some PCs, let's fight. That just doesn't make any sense. The idea would be for a person to die and to not go on to whatever afterlife is included in the cosmology of your game, or if there is no afterlife, just to pass on, fade away, whatever. And to have such a deep motivation, there'd have to be a tremendous will involved to, or magic or something like that, to tie them, in a sense, to a place or a plane or what have you. And I know that in some versions of the game, ghosts are actually on the ethereal plane, and they sort of pass through in and out of that to the material plane, but you know what I mean. I think that for that to happen, either the spirit itself had to have a tremendous desire to remain, unfinished business, whatever, or somebody else bound that spirit, like in a ritual or a spell or something like that. In either case, there was a very specific purpose to this ghost, or whatever you want to call it, remaining in contact with the, quote-unquote real world. So I usually like to have some idea of what that might be. Revenge is always a good one. Evil ritual. Pirate ghost guarding his treasure. That's perfectly acceptable. I've used that one. Anything like that. But just to have randomly some disembodied spirit just float by and attack the party just seems a bit much to me. Also because in many versions of the game, ghosts are pretty powerful. The incorporeal dead usually have some sort of ability or level drain attack. They're incorporeal. They can go right through a wall or a floor or a ceiling. So very frequently they can surprise. Often they can be invisible. They can be very difficult to hit. Sometimes you have to have magic weapons or spells, and sometimes there's a mischance. I think we're getting a little bit into 3rd edition or so, 3.5 with that, but you understand what I'm saying. So that's not a casual encounter. But that's what I have to say about that. And the hauntings, like I say, I tend to think of them more like flavor. I believe it was the Rule Cyclopedia that actually included a monster that was called a haunt, and it was just this sort of the haunted house, ghostly apparition sort of a thing. Using them in your games if you decide to, and you have a reason for them. You have to kind of make up your mind. Is this some sort of maddened spirit that barely understands what's going on around it? All it knows is that it wants to kill. It wants to keep people out of this room. It wants to protect its bones, whatever. Or does it have a higher purpose in the sense of that it has higher reasoning in it, and it's something like tasked with guarding the ancestral crypt of its forefathers, or something like that. And you have to take that into account when you decide how to run the monster and how to run the encounter, because it's going to be almost like two different monsters depending on which way you go with it. But anyway, that's spooks, ghosts, whatever you want to call them. Okay, moving on. Or vampires. No. 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 Closer. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. To me, a vampire, especially an ancient one that's powerful, not just some fledgling recently turned blah 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 blah, is only barely recognizable as once having been human. The older they get, the more powerful they get, there's just a creepier looking they should be. That's just a flavor thing for me, but I like the idea. I like the idea that their humanity gets left behind. I am not a fan of good vampires. You can take the Twilight or the Anne Rice or anything like that. The misunderstood vampire, he just wants to be loved. No. Vampires, bad. Vampires eat people, essentially. They are predators to our species. They are bad. Kill them. So, anyway, that said, yes, I consider vampires quite evil. And therefore, I think that's how they should be run. I think that's how they should be used in a game. I mentioned in a previous episode where I talked about the turning of Undead, I mentioned that, and also in my review of this work, JB's BX Companion, where he has a concept of certain very powerful undead like vampire lords and things like that, which are not turnable. And I think that's a neat idea. I do like the idea of the holy symbol fending them off, but I don't know about necessarily a powerful vampire, and you have to decide how you want to scale that and what constitutes a powerful versus a not so powerful vampire. Being held back, at least momentarily, by presenting a holy symbol. And I don't think it has to be a cleric that does it for that, because that's just playing into the trope, and I like it. They can't go out in the sun, they don't sparkle. They're scared of holy symbols. Holy water hurts them, etc. In some versions of the game, and I think this is true for most versions of D&D, vampires drain ability by their melee attack. They don't actually drain blood. There are variations which are bloodsuckers, but I find that I don't like that personally. And the way I usually work my way around that is the idea that a vampire's touch attack or claw or slam or whatever they call it can in fact drain your strength. It can weaken you. It's like a chilling touch. It's like the hand of death or something like that. And you can run it that way, but it's a temporary loss. I'm not a big fan of temporary ability drain, but in this case I do that because I also throw in, and this is how I run it, you can do it your own way. If he can latch onto you and have a round or so, he can actually, drain blood. And the draining of the blood actually is draining constitution. And it's not something so easy to do in a combat. But if he can yank someone away from the party and, hypnotize them or something like that, and then he can kill them within a couple rounds of drinking their blood, it makes them creepy in a different way to me. And I do like them to be creepy. And I should also mention they are intelligent, or at least any that have lasted any length of time are fairly intelligent, or have someone of some intelligence helping them. Because they are powerful enough, they are, because they're predatory, they have to interact with people, and human beings are very good at eliminating competing species. This is just evolution talking. This has nothing to do with gaming. We've done it in our history as a race multiple times. We've said, hey, there's another species that's filling part of the same niche as us, and we've killed it. We've Neanderthal and etc. We've wiped them out, and that's what we do, and that's what species do in general. I'm not saying this to be preachy or anything like that, but the fact is, human beings would make a concerted effort to eliminate vampires as they found them. Therefore, any vampire that survives for any length of time has got something on the ball. That's just my opinion. Either a fortress, or lots of illusions, or he's hidden himself well, or he keeps to himself and doesn't reveal himself, or he's got lackeys, or all of the above, or whatever. But the point being, the vampire himself is going to only be one part of the total challenge of defeating him. And that should not be an insignificant part, but I do think that it's like a dragon's lair. There should be defenses. There should be contingency plans. There should be preparations. So that's vampires. Okay. Last, but certainly not least, we are coming to the close of this. Liches. Ooh, I love Liches. Liches are so cool. Liches are such a neat idea. I love them. They're evil. Anyway. So, you've got some crazy sorcerer that says, hey, I want to live forever, and I want to study more magic and become more powerful, and I really don't care who I screw over to do it. What can I do to make this happen? I know. I'll perform some unspeakably evil ritual and turn myself into a bag of bones that lasts forever. Kind of a twisted idea. So, you got to take that into account when you think about how you run a lich. They should be super evil. They should be really scary. They should be really powerful. They're really smart. And they are nasty. Because to do that to yourself, you've got to be kind of whacked out to begin with. So you're dealing with a certain obsessive personality at that point. Liches to me are scarier than vampires for the simple reason that a lich doesn't need to go out and hunt people for blood or anything like that. A lich could theoretically spend its whole life in a sealed cave full of spell books studying and be perfectly happy. Because he doesn't need anything else. He doesn't need to eat. He doesn't need to sleep. He doesn't breed. He doesn't drink blood. He doesn't eat food. He doesn't do anything like that. He doesn't have to do anything. He's basically this will and this consciousness locked in this sort of a shell of a body, and he just, clatters around or whatever and does his thing. Now, that's not to say you can't have an ambitious lich, a lich that wants to conquer the world, a lich that wants to defeat the gods, a lich that wants to become a god. I mean, there's all sorts of ideas that you can run with a lich, but the point being, at their core, at their base, they are pretty independent. So they don't have some of those vulnerabilities. There's also the whole idea of the Lich's phylactery, where the idea they've hidden this thing away somewhere or something like that, and if you find the Lich, you smash it and you kill it and everything, and it just grows a new body and it's on its way. I like the idea of a Lich that has several hidey holes and can fall back. So if he gets killed or his current body gets smashed or his current lair gets invaded or whatever, and he's destroyed, he still has a phylactery or phylacteries, and he just picks things up at base B and moves on. All very scary. I think a Lich should be a big boss monster. I don't think a Lich should be a casual encounter, like with vampires and stuff. I think a Lich should have a very specific purpose for being there. I think a Lich should be never be an encounter to be treated lightly or to have pull punches like a dragon. Lich should pretty much kick an unprepared party's butt. And I also don't think they should be turnable. Again, from the BX companion, I don't think you should be able to turn a Lich. I don't care if you're a 20th level cleric. A Lich is just beyond that whole scale. It's just a really, really evil, nasty, terrifying thing, and it is not going to be worried about the fact that you're holding up a little amulet and saying "Be gone." It's not going to matter to it. That said, I don't think a Lich should be omnipotent. I don't think a Lich should be basically a god. I think you do need to know, and you do need to decide if you're going to run one, what its limits are, what its spells are, what its items are, because I do think it's something that can be defeated. Great fun, if you're willing to run this kind of campaign, is to drop clues about the location of its phylactery and have the party trying to hunt it down, or clues about where to find it in the Lich's lair, that sort of thing. Because I don't think a Lich would usually, wear it or on its neck or something like that. 'Cause that would be just too obvious. It's like a little crown or an amulet or a sword or anything. It'd be like no. It's on the other side of the world, buried under a mountain somewhere or something like that. I mean, it would just be foolish to make it that simple to find, and Lichs are not foolish. So, I'll also mention just really briefly the idea that some versions of the game came up with where we have things like alternate versions of Lichs, like the Dracolich, the Beholder Lich. I'm not fans of these because these are really powerful monsters to begin with, and this is just sort of almost a third editionism kind of thing where you're just mashing two things together and going, let's make a Orc Mind Flayer or something like that. Just, no. Just, you want to play a Lich, play a Lich. You want to play a dragon, play a dragon. One or the other. Just go with it. So, wow. Okay, this is coming up on 18 minutes. This is long. But it's not long enough for me to break into two more parts. So we're going to call this the end of part 3. And I guess I'm going to have a mini part 4 where I'll talk a little bit more about turning undead and some other ideas about the undeads in gaming in general. And then we'll wrap this thing up. That's all for now. Take it easy.